Imagine having the life of your dreams. Not temporary cash and glory, but happiness and inner peace. Explore new ways to be a creator and take your own journey into greatness. Is it possible? What does it take to make that happen? It takes the person known for extreme results. He's called the cage breaker and the ultimate catalyst. Coming back from the brink of death and now crushing it for himself and his clients. This is Your Ultimate Life Podcast with Kellen Flukiger.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Your Ultimate Life. Today we are on episode 512 and we're talking about truth, the pillar of truth. And today's episode is titled Context and Perception. The actual stone in the pillar I titled Truth is Perceptual. And yesterday was Truth is Factual, and we talked about facts and how those relate to understanding truth. And then we talked about how we interpret facts and misunderstand them and make them mean all kinds of things they don't. Today, we're going to dive specifically into that whole context thing. Like, what is that? I mentioned briefly yesterday about the book of Context, and we're going to talk a bit about that today, about what it is, what context means, and how your context shapes not only what you think is true, but it also shapes your ability to create power with truth, which is what we're trying to do. So remember, this podcast is about helping you create your ultimate life, a life of purpose, prosperity, and joy that you create by serving with your divine gifts. And I do this every single day because I want to give as much as I can about what I've learned. So every single thing that I talk about here comes from two places. It comes from my own experience, both with the earthly and the divine, and then it comes from client experience, people that I've worked with all of these principles and helped use them for their business and personal benefit. So we are now in the third, I think it's the third stone. Truth is foundational, truth is factual, truth is perceptual. One of the things I did on purpose was put stones next to each other that at first glance could seem contradictory. And I did that on purpose. So yesterday I said truth is factual, and we talked about facts. And today I said truth is perceptual, and we're going to talk about context and perception. And someone could easily say, well, Kellen, which is it? Truthful, facts, or perception? And the answer is both, and I put them next to each other on purpose. Truth is what it is. Nothing can change the facts, the existence of truth, the temperature of something, the reality of something, and so forth. But because truth, whatever it is, any event, goes through our intake mechanism, whether it's your eyes or your ears or your fingers or any input mechanism that you have, including the spiritual ones beyond your five senses, immediately it goes through your interpretational matrix, right? And I'm not talking about Neo and the Matrix. Your interpretational matrix is what I call your context. So if I see two people talking and I have had one set of experiences, I might think they're arguing, and another set of experiences might lead me to believe they're just having an animated discussion, and I wouldn't see any negativity there at all. That happens all the time. That is a result of my context and your context. So your interpretational matrix shapes not only what you believe to be true, but it also, more importantly, shapes what you think you can do. That's really important. So I'm going to just emphasize that again. Your context, your interpretational matrix shapes what you believe is possible in this world. So, and silly example, but one we know about is we used to not take voyages because we believed the earth was flat and you'd fall off the edge. And so that prevented a whole series of behaviors or dictated a whole series of beliefs and behaviors until we learned otherwise. Now, we would like to pride ourselves in knowing better now and all the rest, but it's not so. We're just as ignorant and just as led about by our perceptions as we ever were. We have some different boundaries, but it's still the same. This coronavirus has been a real example of that. Whether you believe it was an intentional launch of a bioweapon, an accidental release, or an act of nature, or a punishment act of God, all of those things I have seen espoused. What you do or don't do is dictated in part by that belief, that piece of your interpretational framework or context. So truth goes through your interpretational context and creates an attitude. And that attitude governs everything you do with respect to that. Now, let's look at some concrete examples to understand how that is or isn't active in your life. How do you believe other people are talking to you? What do you think they mean? One set of words might mean something completely different to me than to you. An example will suffice, and I'll pull one out of my own life. My wife, Joy, she's a very direct and clear person. She's not unkind in the least. She's very considerate and kind and so forth, but she's very direct. Because of my decades of depression and believing that everything that wasn't exactly right was my fault, I used to hear a lot of that kind of conversation as an attack. It would send me into a defensive mode. I would drop into depression, feeling like I should have already done something or I was doing something wrong, and I never would get it right, and that kind of thing. So my context shaped how I heard her communication. It made our conversation very difficult sometimes. When I learned to change my context and she understood my context, we both made adjustments, and that meant our communication stopped being that way. Our conflict went way down, and everything became smoother and easier. A lot of time was saved, a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of apology, a lot of clarification, whatever you want to call it. So that is it's not silly. It was a powerful, meaningful example that saved us a ton of time and a lot of heartache or sadness or even a little sadness in our relationship. So that's a personal example, and that came from being aware of and adjusting my interpretational matrix, my context, and then her being aware of my context. All right, so if you have a business situation where you're trying to sell something or you're trying to talk to someone, understanding your own context is so important. So I'm a coach. I train some coaches. Most of my clients aren't, but I have a few coaches that I train. If you're a coach and you're listening to this and you'd like the benefit of the things that I've learned, there's a Facebook group called Love 'em, Coach 'em, Sign 'em, and it talks about the very simple way to fill your coaching practice. I used to have terrible trouble with that and used to feel really bad about getting to the selling part. Every time I got to the money part of a conversation, my stomach would churn and the energy would shift in the convo, and it got weird. The prospect felt that, and then things got weird. And so it was very difficult for me to fill my practice. I don't have that situation anymore. Why? Because I learned to understand the truth and my interpretational matrix or my context, how I was perceiving things. So that's another very practical example. This one happens to be geared toward coaches, but it is also true with any single person, insurance people, financial services people, real estate people. Every person that has to go find their own clients, has to talk to people, and then have a conversation in a way that allows for potential business, really benefits from understanding their own context, their own interpretation of what's going on. That deep understanding will lead you to really significantly grow your ability to understand, relate to people, and create success in your business. Here's another thing about that. When you know and when you become fully aware of the fact that you don't see the world the way it is, you don't hear what people said, you don't see anything like it is, you see the world how you are. You hear people how you are. You hear people through that context. Now, where did you get a context and how do we change it? Well, that's the key piece, the key meaning of the book, of context. So if you want the course in that, go look it up. And if you want my help, then get a hold of me through Facebook or an email, coachkellenflukiger@gmail.com. But anyway, the key is spare no effort. No effort is too great to learn to understand your own context. Where did your context come from? Well, I call it your Be Deep, and that's an acronym, and it stands for beliefs, definitions, experiences, expectations, and perceptions. And the first letter of all those create the acronym Be Deep. Your Be Deep is different than anyone else's. It really is. And that Be Deep is the filter through which every word and every event passes before it goes into your operational framework, before you can decide what it means and what to do with it. So just understanding that and realizing, wow, I've got this filter on that, of course I do. It's the only one I can have. We all have one. Most people aren't aware of the fact that they have that filter, and they think everything they think and see is exactly how they think and see it, and it isn't. Just that awareness is a gigantic first step, because then it allows you to ask the important question, what else could this mean? What else could be going on here? What do I want to think about or consider in understanding the truth of this situation? So when I say truth is perceptual, regardless of what happened, how you operationalize it or bring it into your life is according to your Be Deep, your context. And often I refer to that as a context straitjacket, because we think it's fixed. We think that how we see stuff is right and that that's the way it is. When you realize it's not that way at all, and there are a whole bunch of valid and useful interpretations and understandings of the very same situation, then you realize your context straitjacket is not a straitjacket. It's the current set of boundaries you have, but truly it's transparent and flexible. And that means you can look at things lots of different ways. Now, I'm not talking about situational ethics. I'm not talking about, defining truth out of existence or ignoring principles. In fact, tomorrow we're going to talk about being guided by principle, which is another aspect of truth. What I am talking about is for you and me to understand that my perception of things is not correct. My perception of things is my perception of things. When you know that and you don't carry a story around it, you triple, quadruple, multiply by 10 your ability to both communicate and your ability to be effective. Because when you can set your own interpretation aside and not create an emotional story around it, that means you can dig into the meaning. Because if you're communicating with someone, what they intended you to feel is the message. What you heard or what you thought is not the message. It becomes the message when you're not aware that you have mangled it. Most often we mangle it maybe only a little, but maybe a lot. So the tools to begin to understand it starts with, one, being aware that you have a context and that everything comes in through that interpretational matrix before you operationalize it in your life. And second, it comes with your ability to set all that, your emotion and interpretations aside, and engage in real listening, the goal of which is to correctly and completely understand not just the words, but the emotion. What is the feeling that's trying to be communicated here? Whether it's someone speaking or their body language or anything else. What's really going on here? And you can't do that until you realize without judgment and without emotion that your interpretational framework is completely flawed. So is everyone's, because it is framed by our individual Be Deep. So understanding that is what I mean by truth is perceptual. It is subject to your perception of it. Now, when you know that, that means you can go to work on that, and you can set aside your self-concept, and you can dig into with active listening skills and with setting aside emotional interpretations and get to what was really going on here. Now, most people have not been listened to that way. Most people, people talk and answer and back and forth and back and forth. People listen to respond. They listen to argue. They listen to whatever. When you really listen to someone, you pay attention, you get clarification, and you truly dig into and understand fully by their acknowledgement what they meant. That's a real powerful experience for people. They haven't been listened to that way, and it gives you a really special place because people that come away, here's what happens. When I listen to people that way, and I try to do it in every conversation, it's a learning, it's a practice, it's a training that I put myself through. People say often to me, I've never been listened to like this. You really understand me. If you're trying to create business, that kind of understanding is so powerful. And it's nothing about you. You can set your ego aside. It doesn't mean anything about you. You are being a person that is loving that person. And that means caring enough about them to see them, to hear them, to fully understand what they are trying to communicate. And that allows you to communicate without misunderstanding on the thread and wavelength that they are on. Now, you don't have to do this, but if you want truth, their truth, which is what all they can express because it's all they've got, all of us are that way, to be operational in your life, and you want to have power as you build your pillar of truth, then sharpen your ability to listen, understand that your context is yours and you can change it if you want to. Understand at least what it is so you can not have truth mangled by it. And if you want to change your context, then go get the book of context and go to work. But simply understanding this will increase your connection to truth, your ability to communicate, your ability to connect with people, your ability to get clients, to fill your business or your coaching practice or whatever business you have with clients, because you have mastered the fact that truth is perceptual.
Open your heart and this time around.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We hope that you take it deeply into your heart and decide for yourself how you can create anything you desire. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends. As always, we'd love to hear your feedback and topic suggestions. Until tomorrow, this is Your Ultimate Life with host Kellen Flukiger.
Stand with your heart in the sky and your feet on